Okay, let's unpack this. This fantastic stack of sources you sent over. This deep dive really hits the core question that underpins, well, pretty much every decision we make. Are we driven by strict logic, or is it pure emotion? You know, we always hear that the most rational choices are the best ones, but if we're being honest, sometimes the decision that just feels right wins out. So what's the real story there?
That is the ultimate mission of this deep dive. We're combining hard neuroscience with practical wisdom from fields that are wildly diverse.
Right.
We've got behavior change, high-stakes salesmanship, even relational therapy.
Yeah.
We're pulling insights from Daniel Kahneman's work, but also therapists like Esther Perel and Sadia Khan, and even Joe Girard.
The greatest salesperson of all time, arguably.
It's a huge scope.
And it suggests that if we want to understand what makes people tick ourselves and others, we have to move beyond this simple either way of thinking.
For sure.
So our goal today is to tackle 3 connected questions. First, biologically, which one fires first? Is it logic or is it emotion? Second, how do experts reframe this idea of perceived cost once we know that answer? And finally, is there any credible theory that suggests some kind of logic actually precedes our feelings?
And, if you take one thing away right at the start, let it be this. The sources, they all reveal that this classic battle...
Logic versus emotion.
Right. It's built on what they call a false dichotomy. They aren't enemies, they're partners. And the sheer weight of the data suggests that even if you think you're a super analytical person, 90, maybe 95% of your decisions are still being driven by feeling.
Wow.
The logic, it just arrives later to clean everything up.
So, okay, let's start with the hard wiring then. Let's dig into the biology of that 90 to 95% split. Joe Girard, in his work, he really emphasizes the physical architecture of the brain, right? He explains why information flows from the inside out.
Yes, and this is an evolutionary reality we just can't get around. Our brain processes information through 3 basic sequential systems. The first one to fire is the reptilian brain. It's the oldest part.
Pure survival.
Purely survival and instinct. It handles rapid threats, core biological needs, that kind of thing.
So that's the first safety check, the automatic stuff. What's next in line?
Next up is the limbic system, which people often call the emotional brain. It's all about memories, feelings, social attachments. It's really the engine room of our motivation.
Okay.
Only after those 2 systems have had their say does the information finally reach the newest part of the brain, the neocortex. That's the seat of rational thought, planning, and all our deliberate logic.
So the path is instinct, then feeling, then rational thought. It's like a biological traffic jam where the rational mind always gets stuck behind that immediate, automatic, emotional response.
It does.
If that's the case, how quickly does the emotional brain actually override the rational one?
It's remarkably fast. Our sources highlight that emotion fires almost instantaneously, whereas the logical processing of the neocortex, it takes measurable time.
And there's an even more crucial factor. When the brain experiences stress or fear or urgency, any kind of high-stakes situation, the limbic system goes into overdrive and the logic centers will literally begin to shut down to conserve energy.
So the emotional brain takes command when the pressure's on.
It takes complete command.
That helps explain why, in a moment of panic, you can't think straight. All the processing power is just dedicated to fight or flight, which is governed by feeling, not by calculation.
Precisely. And the data on this, you can't really argue with it, especially when we look at decisions under just normal conditions, not even stress. Research consistently finds that emotions account for the vast majority of our choices.
For anyone listening who really leans on data, let's bring in Daniel Kahneman. His Nobel Prize-winning work on this around the financial world. He found that we make financial decisions, always we assume is purely logical, based on 90% emotion and only 10% logic. That's a massive gap.
It completely reframes how you look at something like fiscal responsibility. If you ever, say, made a meticulous budget, only to find yourself splurging on an expensive vacation or some luxury item that just gave you intense emotional satisfaction,
You've lived that 90-10 split.
you're experiencing it in real time. The feeling of, say, future status or immediate relief or just deep satisfaction, it completely overshadowed the logical math of the expense.
So the implication for everyone listening, no matter your job or personality, is that we're not these thinking machines that sometimes feel. We're fundamentally feeling machines that think.
That's it. Our thinking brain serves our emotional state way more than we realize.
Yeah.
It serves the state, and then it cleans up the mess afterwards with a nice, tidy story.
Which brings us to the next logical step. If emotion is so dominant, is logic just irrelevant? This is where the whole thing gets tricky. The Sources suggest this whole logic versus emotion debate is actually moot.
Yeah, because they're fundamentally inseparable. That's the argument from experts like Leonard Malott now. He really emphasizes that even if you believe you're applying pure cold reason to a problem,
Yeah.
your feelings are woven into the very process of thinking.
The dichotomy is an illusion.
It's completely illusory.
I mean, think about a simple choice like deciding on a flavor of ice cream. Rationally, you could calculate calories, cost, nutrition. But way before your neocortex finishes that spreadsheet, your emotional brain has already picked a winner.
Exactly. Your limbic system fires first, right?
Right.
It pulls up memories of previous enjoyment. It links a flavor, let's say chocolate, to comfort or good childhood memory. That feeling, it becomes the dominant input.
And then you use logic to justify it.
You use your neocortex to rationally say, oh, well, it's the source of calcium, or, you know what, I deserve a treat. But the actual choice was driven by feeling.
So what exactly is this hidden role emotion is playing, even when we think we're being super rational? The insights from the Harvard Gazette say emotion is like a silent partner. It guides the direction and the selection of the whole rational process.
This is such a critical nuance. Emotion unconsciously influences our decisions way before we form a conscious thought. For instance, it influences what sensory information we even bother to pay attention to. If you already dislike a political candidate, you're going to filter out the facts that favor them.
So we filter the data stream before it even reaches the calculator.
Precisely. Emotion dictates how we process that information. And this is crucial, which specific memories and goals we choose to bring into our decision. If your main goal is safety, your emotional brain will only feed your logical brain inputs related to risk. It will just shut out anything related to adventure or excitement.
It's so powerful to realize that emotion isn't the opposite of logic. It's the force that sets the starting point and the filter through which all the rational stuff has to pass.
It creates a self-fulfilling logical prophecy.
Yeah. Okay, so if emotion is hand-selecting the data set for us, let's see how that works when we calculate something practical, like perceived costs. The sources all suggest that costs, time, effort, money, are evaluated emotionally first.
And then we create a rational story for that feeling. James Clear's framework on behavior change is a perfect example of this.
Right, the 4 laws.
His 4 laws are all about minimizing cost. He says, make good habits easy, which is reducing perceived cost, and make bad habits difficult, which is increasing the cost. But those costs are rarely just about physical effort.
And crucially, Clear's work really hits on the psychological part. If a habit aligns with your identity, like you see yourself as a runner, the perceived cost of getting out of bed at 5 a.m. just plummets.
It does.
It's not about the effort anymore, it's about the emotional alignment with who you think you are.
And that emotional alignment, it acts as the internal benefit that makes the choice seem logical. Now, contrast that with, say, the business view from Joe Girard. He knew that just relying on facts and figures, the logical specs of a car usually fails.
Because it ignores the emotional processing order.
Right. The connection, the trust, feeling good about the seller, that matters more than just convincing someone with numbers.
In sales, they call this customer perceived value, or CPV. It's the customer's evaluation of the total benefits versus the total costs.
We have to stress, this value is a fundamentally emotional assessment, which then gets stressed in rational language. The benefit isn't just a lower price, it's the feeling of status or the relief of solving a problem. The logical part, this product has X features for Y price. That's just the justification you write after your emotional brain gives the green light.
We can even broaden this into relationships with the work of experts like Esther Perel and Cynthia Khan. Here, cost isn't money, it's emotional investment and risk.
Right. Perel talks about emotional investments and withdrawals. She argues people evaluate relationships using what she calls emotional logic. What feels right based on deep relational needs like safety or excitement often doesn't line up with a cold, logical assessment of, say, efficiency or stability.
The cost of being vulnerable, for example, is a huge one.
Exactly. Sadi Khan frames perceived costs as including emotional risks, vulnerability, the potential for being deeply hurt. Those evaluations are intensely emotional, but the decisions we make are then rationalized as sensible. I chose to pull back because it was the safer, more logical option for my peace of mind.
Okay, that's a really complete framework showing emotion is the driving force, but we did set up a challenge at the start. Is there any credible theory that says some kind of logic actually determines the emotion that fires?
And this is where we need to spend some serious time because this offers the deepest integration of the two. We need to look at cognitive appraisal theory. This theory suggests that emotions aren't just random bursts of feeling. They arise from our cognitive evaluations, our appraisals of the situation.
So if I suddenly hear a loud noise, my feeling of fear isn't just a random surge, it's the result of a split-second assessment.
Precisely. Let's break down that split-second assessment. When you hear the noise, your brain performs an automatic appraisal. The first one might be goal relevance. Does this matter to me? If yes, an emotion is triggered. Then, goal congruence. Is this noise good or bad for my goals? If it's bad, a negative emotion like fear is triggered.
So two different people hearing the same noise could have two completely different emotions based on their immediate, non-conscious interpretation.
Absolutely. Imagine you hear a loud, rapid rattling sound. If your immediate appraisal identifies it as, a small, harmless toy a kid dropped, you feel minor annoyance. If your appraisal identifies it as a rattlesnake, you feel immediate fear.
The logical evaluation, the assessment of the threat, precedes and determines the emotion.
It precedes and determines it. But this logic, it isn't conscious, deliberate reasoning. It's this super fast evaluation based on survival programming and past experience. It's a pre-conscious logic.
But wait, what about the counter evidence? The sources mention effective neuroscience. Doesn't that research say emotion can actually occur unconsciously and before cognition?
It does, and that's the key tension here. Effective neuroscience shows that emotions can be triggered unconsciously. Subliminal stimuli, things you don't even consciously register, can cause emotional reactions that then influence your behavior. So that supports the idea of the limbic system as the first responder.
So we have a beautiful conflict. Appraisal theory says a fast subconscious logic creates the emotion. Effective neuroscience says the emotion can fire instantly, sometimes with no cognitive input at all.
And this is where the newest concept comes in to try and reconcile the two. Implicit cognitive appraisals. This suggests the brain is just constantly performing these rapid, unconscious evaluations, like a non-conscious logical checklist.
The brain's silent operating system running in the background.
Exactly. It's constantly asking, does this situation matter to my goals? Can I handle this potential threat? Because these evaluations happen so quickly in milliseconds and automatically, they feel like pure instantaneous emotion. But they're rooted in this deeply implicit logical processing.
It sounds like the prefrontal cortex and the limbic system aren't really in a competition, but more of a continuous loop. The subconscious mind just runs these lightning-fast logical checks that generate the emotional responses we feel.
They are unified. The most accurate model is that our conscious logic is built on a foundation of subconscious logic, and that subconscious logic is expressed as emotion.
Okay, let's synthesize this whole deep dive then. Let's land on the most accurate, unified model of motivation, built from all of these sources.
Well, the unified model really confirms that core finding. We are feeling machines that think. Our decision-making process is fundamentally emotional first, and we use logic almost exclusively to justify the path our feeling has already chosen. We absolutely buy on emotion and justify with logic.
And the power of that emotional imperative is that if something generates high emotional satisfaction, a purchase, a habit, whatever, your brain will automatically write a rational justification that makes the whole thing seem perfectly logical.
And crucially, perceived costs are fundamentally emotional evaluations. Whether you're selling a product, trying to stick to a habit, or managing relational risk, the evaluation starts with the feeling of ease or safety or status. The logical framework is just the explanation you wrap around it.
And finally, the separation is illusory. Logic and emotion aren't competitors, they're partners. Emotion provides the sheer force, the why we move, and logic, both consciously and subconsciously, provides the guidance and the story afterward.
We've covered everything from milliseconds of brain architecture to the complex dynamics of therapy and sales, and they all point to this integrated reality. It completely changes how you view your habits, your purchases, every interaction you have.
It certainly redefines what it means to be a rational person.
And this leaves us with one final provocative thought for you to chew on. If we accept that 90 to 95% of our motivation comes from these subconscious evaluations, then the most effective way to change a behavior isn't to consciously argue with yourself.
That's just the 10% trying to control the 90%.
Yeah.
Right.